When we exclude the titles of your tracks and when we exclude the videos and your philosophy about music, when we forget about the author, just music, I really have problem with defining whether it's urban, industrial, or whether it's music that tries to reflect the nature in electronic way.
I wouldn't say it's industrial. If I had to choose one of the two, I would say it's more of nature. But I think that's more because it really just comes from emotion and natural things, which to me is, I don't really think of it as being coming from industry or these kind of things. I don't really think it actually comes from nature necessarily, but I think because it's purely emotional, I would say that comes more from nature. I don't really think it comes from industrial. I mean, maybe techno and these kind of things will, but the music I make, I think if you took all that away, I don't think it would be associated with like industrial or these kind of things. I think if I had to choose one of the two, it would definitely be nature. It's not completely natural because you're using technology and we live in an urban environment, so we don't live in a forest. So it's like you're taking this and it's in an urban environment. I mean, I guess in that way it could be urban. I guess I never really, music for me when I make it, I never think of it as having a place. So for me, it's also very abstract. I never think of it as being in this place or this place or this place. It's only expressing an emotion, so I never really think of it as having a place necessarily, like whether it's urban or outside or these kind of places. I only think of the emotion. It's very abstract. But I mean, what you said, I think I could possibly see that. But I've never thought of it as having a place before until you asked me that. So. I mean, I will add one thing. I think probably the urban does affect it in some way because I live in an urban environment, but I always want to not live in an urban environment, but then I need to live in an urban environment. So I think in some ways, I think my music does probably say something about that. I would say that urban has something to do with that because I live in an urban environment. Although I kind of like seek to escape that like a lot of people, so maybe it says something about that.
There are many references to nature in your music. When we watch your video clip, we often see clouds, trees, sky or sea. For example, One Last Look at the Sea, My Skies Cry Your Name, or White Clouds Drift On and On.
Well, first of all, I mean, people who make YouTube videos, I can't control anything about what they make for that, so I have nothing to do with what they put on a YouTube video. Most people who make YouTube videos tend to put nature things, but I don't ask them to do that. I mean, the titles of the music that I make, almost all of what I make, they deal with things that have happened to me. So it's not really actually about nature or a place, it's about things that have happened in my life. So the titles that you're reading, they're all about things that have happened to me at some point in my life, my experiences, or really just human experience in general through the way that I've experienced my life. I see on YouTube that many people choose to put them to these nature things, but I don't know that I mean, I guess in some ways I can see where that fits, but I don't know if I would necessarily do that myself. I don't know. I don't really think about, when I make music, I don't think about imagery. So I only think about the thing that happened, the emotion that I want to express, but I don't think about this kind of imagery. So sometimes I look at these YouTube videos, I think what they do is quite beautiful, but I don't know if it's necessarily what I would do if I did it myself. I don't know. I mean,
sometimes it's banal.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, sometimes it's cool, but I don't really know it really has anything to do with it, because it's really about something that happened, not really necessarily this nature or these kind of scenes, so it's hard to say.
I wonder if the title of album, At Night the City Becomes the Sea, it can be such a bridge between thinking of nature and civilization in your music. City becomes the sea.
That title actually comes from a movie. It comes from a Japanese movie called Spirited Away. And that place where that girl lived, in the day it was like that tower, but then at night they couldn't get anywhere. It all turned into the sea, so they couldn't leave that place. And in order to leave that place, they had to find a way to get across the sea. So that album was actually made. It's a bit strange, like when I watched that movie maybe 10 years ago or something, I had written notes at the time about like the way the movie made me feel, some things that it triggered in me at the time. And 1 or 2 years ago when I made the album, I actually found those notes that I'd written 10 years ago about the emotions from the movie, and then I took those notes and translated them into what became the album. But it's really more about this, because that movie is also about this kind of world that she's trying to escape. So in a way, it's what you're talking about. That girl is trying to escape her reality with this family and her parents, and she's trying to escape this reality into another reality which is beyond this like very normal thing that for her is very uncomfortable. So she's trying to escape to a better place. So it really kind of tells that story in like my own way, but it's actually related to that movie actually.
What do you imagine, what do you think about which pictures when you compose your music? Because I think your music is very visual.
Actually, it's strange. When I make the music, I don't have that in my mind. I only have the thing, like I said, these are usually things that happen to me at some point. So I have that experience in my mind. But then when I go back and listen to it later, after I make it, then I also can sometimes see more of these things. But so it's different. If I'm listening to it, I can also see some things. But when I'm making it, I'm only thinking about the experience from that time.
So what kind of emotions or experience do you go through or influence you when you make your music?
Sometimes it's something that just happened to me. A lot of times it's things from my past. I mean, it's hard to say exactly what experiences. A lot of them were fairly difficult experiences. I mean, the first day was about the death of my father. Several albums are about very specific things that happened in my life, so it was like my way of trying to overcome these things instead of letting them overcome me. But generally, sometimes it's about a memory from a long time ago, sometimes it's something that just happened, but it's usually comes from something that happened to me in some way. Sometimes it can help me overcome the situation. Like with the first day, that was made like, I started making that only like 2 weeks after my father died. So it was like a really hard time for me, so I wanted to turn it into something really positive to like kind of thank him and show a lot of beautiful things that had happened because of him. So I tried to change into that. Sometimes I tried to address something that's very sad for me and actually it becomes worse because the music is like, yeah, it makes it worse because I think about it more and the music becomes more overpowering and then actually the music becomes more overpowering than the experience was originally, and actually it becomes, I don't want to say worse, but it becomes more intense, and it can have the opposite effect sometimes. Yeah. Sometimes it helps me get through the experience, and sometimes it makes it harder, actually.
When we analyze some titles of your tracks, nothing you want will ever come through, the place has only known sadness or the art of dying alone. Here we have negative, difficult emotions or experience.
Usually it's more sadness. But I think things like these tracks, they only really address sadness, but I think the beauty of life is dealing with that sad. Life is sad. So for me, I think life is a sad thing, but I think part of the beauty of life is dealing with that and understanding that it's sad and it doesn't end. You'll die someday, the people you love will die someday, sad things happen and it's part of life. So I think the beauty is in understanding that and accepting that and living with that and dealing with that in those ways. Some things I make are maybe more positive or beautiful, and maybe sometimes the things I make, I'm trying to make these things like more beautiful, but I would say most of the time it's more from sadness. Sometimes it's from something more happy.
I feel that sometimes ambient, that is not religious music, but still able to cause religious emotions. I think that your track with Jon Hogut, your grand finale, A Theatre of One, this track has such a potential.
That track, I mean, that album really for me and Ian, we did it to try to kind of address the same thing that happened in our life, but for him it happened like 10 years before me, and then it happened to me 10 years later, and we like put the experiences together and the music from those times together. I mean, as far as it being spiritual, I guess you could say spiritual. Religious, I mean, I'm an existentialist, so that's not very religious, but I think religion really, at the end of the day, it's kind of all the same thing. I think religion, without getting too whatever, I mean, we're all looking for answers in our own way, whether it's in religion or in music or whatever. You're finding your way to live your life and things that make you feel that your life has answers or meaning. So, I mean, I think music can also do that. I don't know if I would go as far as to say it's religious or has connection to religion, but I think in the sense that for many people they find the meaning for life in music. I guess it could be that.
In what way the music you create helps you to find the meaning of life?
I think it goes both ways. Like, it helps me find the meaning, but it is already the meaning. So if I didn't have music, life would, I mean, it sounds fucking contrived, but if I didn't have music, life would already have no meaning. So for me, it's to try to, like, I don't know, I guess try to talk about things to me that make life have meaning. So a lot of those things are maybe sad, and sometimes they're things that are difficult to talk about, but this is part of what makes life have meaning, and it's part of what my life has been. So they're the things that I feel I have to try to talk about.
And the last question, your music is monumental, is epic, your tracks are long, 10 minutes, even 25 minutes. Why?
I guess because I think whatever I'm talking about, there's a lot for me to say about it. So I make a track as long as I think it needs to be. So I mean, if I make a track, I need to make sure I said everything I need to say. So usually for me, that takes quite a long time to say all those things. So I can't try to shorten it down, or for any other reason, I have to say everything that I wanted it to say. So sometimes, and over time, the tracks have gotten longer and longer and longer, because through my music, I'm able to say more clearly the things I want to say. So then since I can say more, they get longer and more detailed. So over time, they've gotten longer and longer.